Hello, my name is Tessa Chomistek, and I'll be presenting on cognitive functioning and social outcomes among survivors of childhood brain tumor. My area of research is in pediatric psychosocial oncology, which means I look at children with cancer or survivors of cancer and the psychological and social outcomes of that. A bit of background here, brain and central nervous system tumors are the second most common pediatric cancer, with approximately 74% 5-year survival rate. So this shows a large majority of these patients surviving, which really emphasizes the importance for us to be studying what this looks like long term. The treatments that these children go through target the brain. Radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery are all extremely toxic and invasive treatments. You can see from this diagram here, this was a child who had a brain tumor removed and was left with a hole in their brain. For a growing and developing child, that could have really impactful cognitive impacts. We see from the literature attention problems, memory span issues, deficits in executive functioning, as well as intellectual ability. Not only that, but we see social difficulties. So in childhood, these survivors are less likely to have as many friends. They're more likely to be bullied, feel isolated and lonely. Not only that, but into adulthood, they're less likely to live independently, less likely to be employed, and less likely to complete post-secondary education. So we know that toxic cancer treatments to the central nervous system are related to cognitive deficits. We also know that survivors of pediatric brain tumor experience social difficulties. What we don't know is what, if any, of these cognitive factors are associated with these social difficulties. So I wanted to examine the relationships between neurocognitive processes and social functioning to help identify potential targets for intervention methods. I looked at 91 survivors of pediatric brain tumor, which were recruited from 4 institutions across Canada, with a mean age of 11.2 years, approximately half and half split of male and female, and majority of participants were 5 years post-diagnosis. The neurocognitive processes I looked at were executive functioning, working memory, intellectual ability, and attention. For those of you that don't know, executive functioning is basically what I like to say the air traffic control system of the brain. So, how well we integrate and communicate information from the outside world into our brain and ourselves. Social functioning, I looked at overall social skills. So I did a cross-sectional analysis, which was actually part of a larger longitudinal intervention study. And I looked at the baseline measures of parent and child surveys, and the battery of measures measured both those neurocognitive and social functioning pieces that I just mentioned. So I conducted a linear regression, which found that executive functioning, specifically parent ratings of their child's executive functioning, were significantly related to social functioning. More specifically, lower executive functioning corresponded to poor social skills. So if we have a child who has decreased ability to have that air traffic control system or that communication or integration ability of information, it makes sense why they would have poor social skills in something, say, like holding a conversation. So integrating what the person is saying, how the child is going to respond, their emotions around the scenario, and really everything that encompasses that social aspect of a conversation would be impacted by a deficit in executive functioning. And we found no other factors related to social skills. So in conclusion, poor executive functioning is associated with poor social functioning in survivors of pediatric brain tumor and should therefore be investigated as a potential target for intervention. Intervention techniques should work to improve executive functioning in survivors. So what would this look like? Well, a child comes in with a brain tumor diagnosis. They then receive treatment. From there, we can screen them for executive functioning deficits. If they show executive functioning deficits, we would introduce an intervention program that was targeted at assisting or aiding these executive functioning deficits. And then the end goal would be to mitigate social functioning deficits and hopefully help this kid be better on their way for success later in life. I want to acknowledge the people on this page and as well as the funding for this project and my summer student funding. Thank you very much. Here's some of my references and thank you for listening.